Hey, welcome. In today's video, we will create a Django project. We will start with a recipes project, but the main focus today is just to have the project running, to start with the project and work on the authentication part. That means giving the user the ability to create accounts, to sign in, to log out of your system, and also displaying different pages to logged in and non-logged in users. So let's do it. As you can see here, I'm using WSL as my environment in Windows. I'm already located on a folder called recipes where I want my project to be created in. So first step is to create the virtual environment. So let's say Python 3 -m venv. That created the virtual environment, as you can see there. So now we can activate that virtual environment. So all the installations happens inside such virtual environment. The command is source venv bin activate. This command will work for WSL, Linux, and Macs. If you are using Windows, my recommendation is to install WSL and use it as your developer environment. I'm planning to create a video on that, so if you are interested, please put a comment down below and I will be sure to work on it as soon as possible. So we have the virtual environment active now. You can see it there. The next step is to install Django. So let's say pip3 install Django. Django is installed. Perfect. So now let's create the project. So here we say Django admin, Django dash admin start project. So my recommendation is call it config and put a period. That means all the files should be created here, not in an extra folder. Now we have the config folder, the manage.py, and the virtual environment. The next step is to use the manage.py to start an application, and here you can call it recipes now. This application will be the website that the users will see. So let's create it. So we have everything ready. We can try it. We can start the server just to make sure everything is working. So let's do Python 3 manage.py run server. That will start your server. And as you can see here, the server is running on this URL. So let's go to it. Let's open that on the browser. There it is. We have a simple project. We are using Django 4, as you can see there. And this is the empty shell. So let's put logic into this project. Let's open this project with Visual Studio Code. So I will need to stop my server, type code here, and that will open my VS Code. We have the configuration, that it's the main project configuration. We have recipes folder, that it's the actual project, and we have the manage.py file that allows us to start the project and do some management actions in there. The first step is let's go into the config folder. Let's look for settings.py, and here in installed apps, let's install the application that we created. We call it recipes. Put a comma at the end. And that's it. We have the application linked to the main project. Let's save the changes here. Now let's go into the recipes folder. Let's look for views.py and we will create the first view in here, the first action. So let's call it index that receives the request, and we'll do this. So whenever the user wants to see this page, this action, what we want to do is to return the render of this request request with a file name home HTML. Great. So if somehow the user gets to execute this, we will return home HTML. We'll render and return home HTML. That file doesn't exist, so let's create it here inside recipes. Let's create a new folder called templates. Again, the name of the folder should be exactly like that, templates. And inside templates, let's create two files. Let's create base HTML and let's create the require home HTML. Why two files? Because most likely you want to have a base layout, a base presentation for multiple pages in your project. You know that navbar on the top, footer on the bottom, that it's the same for most of your project, for most of your pages. We do it with base HTML, that way we don't need to repeat the same syntax over and over and over. Okay, let's start with the basic structure of an HTML5 page. There it is. If this shortcut, if this image shortcut is not working for you, it's because by default Visual Studio Code will treat this HTML file as a Django file, not as pure HTML, and a lot of these handy shortcuts will not work. So what you can do is to type all this code manually, or change in here how Visual Studio Code interprets your file. So you just click in there, most likely it says Django HTML, click there, look for HTML, hit enter, and now the option will work. The autocomplete will work. Once you do that, it's a good idea to get back to the Django one, to the Django language mode. So click in the bottom again, look for Django HTML, click on it, and perfect. You are back to the default settings for Visual Studio Code. So let's change here the title. Let's name it recipes site, or site, yeah. As we plan to use Bootstrap, it's a good idea to start with a div container, class of container or container fluid. We'll check that later on. And in here, we want the contents of the specific pages. Here on the top, we'll put the navbar. So let's create a div for now that says navbar will be here. Let's close the div. And let's do the same for the footer. We'll copy, paste, and change footer, or change navbar for footer. Usually that's the basic structure of a base share layout, base HTML for Django projects. The idea is whatever you have here will be visible on most of the pages, or all the pages that inherit or use this template. So the specific pages, I want them to be rendered here. So I need to create a Django block called maybe content, and don't forget to end the block. Perfect. Now we have the base layout, super simple. Let's go to home HTML and let's create the contents. As we already have the head and the body, the basic structure of an HTML5, we don't need to repeat that on the children pages. So we just need to go straight into the content. Let's create a heading one. Welcome to my recipes site. Perfect. So we have the views action that will render home HTML. Home HTML is this one. Oh, but I'm missing to import the layout. We need to specify the home HTML will use the base layout. So for that, let's say extends, base HTML, that's your name of your template. And now we need to specify that this content, I want them to be rendered inside here, inside the block. So let's grab this with a block and the name of the block. We call it content. And we need to end that block in here. And the block. My color coding may not be matching yours. By default, I have this configured to look as HTML. That's the color coding that you most likely have. Great. So we have everything. We have the views, the both files that I need for the views. Now I need to specify the URL. We need to create a URL that when the browser hits that URL, when the user visits that URL on the browser, this action will be executed and the action will return your home HTML. So now let's create the URLs. So in the recipes folder, let's create a new file, call it urls.py. And in here we will have the mappings between the URL that it's on the browser and the action that will be executed from the views. So let's start importing from Django URLs. Let's import a path. From here, let's import views, the views module, the views file. We need to create a list. The name of the list must be URL patterns, exactly like that. And in here, let's create some paths. So on the root page, when there is nothing on the URL other than your domain, mysuperrecipes.com, and that's it, nothing extra. When that's the URL, I want the views.index action to be executed or to handle this request. And the name for this route will be root. So now, after this, we need to register this urls.py with the main configuration with your config folder urls file. So let's go to config folder. Let's look for urls.py, and this is the main URLs configuration. Let's start here with an import from Django urls conf. Let's import include. We already have the list in there with one path. Let's create another one. Let's say path. When there is nothing on the URL, let that be handled by the include of the name of your application. In my case, my application is called recipes.urls is the name of the file that we just created. So this way, what we are saying here is if on the browser you have the domain name /admin, for example, mysuperrecipes.com/admin, that request will be handled by this one, by this admin side URLs. But if there is nothing else on the domain, then let that be handled by the recipes URLs, and the recipes URL says if it's an empty path, let's use a views.index to handle that request. Everything is ready. Let's go to the browser and let's try it. First of all, make sure that your project is running, that you don't have any errors. Then get back to the browser and refresh. And there it is. We have the first web page. This is my root page, so there is nothing extra on the domain, not admin, nothing else. And you can see here that both HTML files were combined. The base HTML that is putting the navbar in the footer, and my specific site, my specific home HTML that is putting this heading one in there. Getting back to the code, the first thing that I wanna do is to add some style. The page is working, that's great, but let's put the basic style so it looks decent at least. Let's add some links. Let's remove these two divs in here. Let's add some links for the style, for Bootstrap CSS, for Bootstrap JS. And for that, let's get into bootstrap.com, get bootstrap.com here. Let's scroll down a little bit, and here we'll find the links that we need. Install via CDNs. So let's copy the CSS. Click there to copy, get back to your code, paste it here on the top, and get back to the browser, and now copy the JavaScript link. Let's put that here at the bottom of the body. Reorganize this a little bit. Perfect. So now the page has Bootstrap enabled. The first thing that I want to do with Bootstrap is to copy the navbar. Let's put the classic navbar that we always see on Bootstrap based pages. But for now, let's be basic. Let's go to readable documents. Let's look for the navbar. Components, navbar, here it is. Let's use this one, the traditional one of these. Will copy to the clipboard. Perfect. Get back to your HTML and paste it here below. Oh, sorry. Let's move this one in the proper location. That should be there in the head. Great. Not in the body. So I just moved the CSS to there. And now I can paste here all this huge code that we copied from Bootstrap for the navbar. Let's change the title of the navbar. Let's say recipes. Save the changes. Decompress all that code for now. Get back to the browser, refresh, and let's see. Get back to our page, and beautiful. We have a Bootstrap page in there. Of course, we need to tweak, we need to change the menu items, maybe leave or remove that search box. I don't know yet. But for now, again, let's not stop too much on the presentation. Let's just change the background color of the navbar. We can see here the background is light. I don't want the background light. I want it dark for now. That will set the background to be black, but also the text will be black, so it's not readable. In order to change that, we need to add an extra class, navbar dark. This will prepare the text to be over a dark background. That means the text will be white. So save the changes, get back and refresh your browser, and there it is. We have a navbar with a color. The color is too bright. Maybe I prefer a shade of gray, a shade of blue. We'll leave that for later when we start working on CSS. Now we have a page, everything starts from here. If you remember, from views that renders the page, and for this to work, we also need a URLs in here. Let's work now on creating users. Let's create a sign up page that will give the ability to users to create their own accounts. So let's create another action. Let's call it a sign up, maybe sign up that receives the request and returns. For now, start simple, the render of the request. I want to put these HTML files on a specific folder. So in the out folder, sign up HTML. Perfect. Let's go and create this folder in the templates and then this file inside it. So here in templates, new folder, let's call it out. And that's because we decided to put the out or the file into the out folder. That's what I'm creating that folder in there. That will help me keeping a cleaner organization with my files. Now that we have the folder, we need to create the file. We are calling sign up HTML. In sign up HTML, we will start with the same extending. So extends the base HTML file. That's my main layout. And also specifying that in a block called content, we will create whatever we put in here and block. Let's start with a form. The method for this form will be post, of course, because we want to send data to the server. And let's create a heading 4 inside here that says create a new account. The rest of the form will be provided by Django views. After the heading 4, we will put the CSRF token, and then we'll render the form, a form that we will not create manually for now. The form will come as directly from Django. So we'll receive a form. We just need to render it here. A form as perfect. Form as in paragraphs. We also need the button to submit. So let's create a button. Now create account. Let's add some bootstrap classes to this one. So classes will be btn primary maybe. Great. We have the HTML. So we have the views that redirects to the HTML. We have the HTML. We just need the URL for that. Let's create another URL. When the URL is / authentication, maybe out / sign up. Use.signup is the action that will handle the request, and the name for this URL will be sign up. I have an extra slash at the beginning. I don't need the slash at the beginning, and I also have a typo in here, sign up. If we run it, we will get an error because your HTML is expecting a form that your views is not sending. So let's fix that. Let's send here along the render the form that will be displayed in the HTML. We create a form in here as a user creation form that we need to import this function from Django contrib out forms. Let's import that form that we need, user creation form, and let's import another form that we will need later on, authentication form that will be used for the login page. So getting back to here to the sign up, we create the form. We just need to pass that as the context for the render in here. So the HTML is expecting a form. Let's send a form attribute on the dictionary, and it's this form object. Perfect. Let's try it. I think it should work now. So refresh, save everything, get back. This is still running. So let's go now to the URL. We created the URL as out / come on, I cannot type sign up. Perfect. So here the user can create an account. If I don't click the button, it will not work because we haven't applied migrations. So we need to apply migrations, and for that we need to stop the server. And now that we are stopping the server, I also want to install an extra package that will help us improving the presentation. This thing works, but it's not the most beautiful thing in the world. Let's install Crispy forms that will help improving the presentation a little bit, especially for bootstrap projects. So let's get to the terminal. Let's stop your terminal, clear my mess. First of all, let's apply migrations. So Python 3, manage.py, migrate. That will apply the migrations, that will create the database and the table for users. Perfect, everything is okay. Now let's install Crispy forms. pip3 install Django Crispy forms. Great. Let's start the project and we will leave the project running. Manage.py run server. Perfect, the project is running without any errors. Let's get back to the code. So first, let's go to settings.py and configure the Django Crispy forms, the thing that we just installed. So let's get into the config folder, settings.py, and in the install apps, let's add Crispy forms. So it's crispy _ forms. We just need one global settings for Crispy form, all caps, type crispy, template pack to be template to be bootstrap. That way we say crispy every time you render a form, use the bootstrap presentation, divs, styles, and all of that. Let's get back to the sign up HTML. And in here, let's specify that instead of rendering form as paragraphs, Django should use crispy forms package to render these ones. So pipe crispy. But before we try it, we need to load crispy forms. So let's go to the top. Let's load a crispy forms tags. Save the changes. Let's get to the browser. Let's refresh and let's see. And there it is. There is a small difference. Everything is a little bit more organized, it's more in tune with Bootstrap presentation. With that and a few lines of CSS, this page will look much better. Now that we have the form, let's work on the logic. Let's work on what happens when the user fills the form and presses the submit button. When that happens, the same action that is creating the form will receive a GET request. So now we need to differentiate in here if the request method happens to be post, then we need to create a new user. Otherwise, let's just show the form. Let's move these 2 lines, 1 indentation forward. Perfect. And let's work on the logic. So if it is a post request, we need to get the data from the request, create a user with that data, and then it's up to you if you want to immediately log in the user after creating the account, or you want to send the user to the login page and forcing the user to retype the credentials. Let's do it right here. So we need to create a form, the same user creation form, but this time we will pass in the request post information, the data that is captured on the UI. So now we validate if the form is valid. Is a method, so I'm missing the parentheses. There it is. We need to create the user. To create the user, we just need to save. So form.save, that will register the user. So now it's up to you if you want to log in the user or you want to send the user to the login page. I want to log in the user. I don't want the user to need to go to the login page and retype the credentials again. If I have the credentials, I can log in this newly created user. So let's do it here. Let's get the username from the form, clean data, and from that we want to get the username. We also want to get the password. Form clean data, get the password 1. Let's get the password 1 because if you remember on the UI, the user needs to retype the password twice. So this is password 1, this is password 2. That's why I'm adding the 2 at the end of the password in there. So let's log in the user with authenticate method. And to that, let's pass the username to be my username variable. And let's pass the password to be my password variable. Of course, you can do this in a single line, getting this line and put it here instead of the variable. That way you don't need to declare variables. I prefer this way, it seems cleaner and no big deal with that. So we just need to import the authenticate. So let's go to the top and from Django contrib out, let's import authenticate. Let's also import login and log out, some methods that we will need later on, this thing is ready. We'll authenticate the user. We have the user from the database. We just need to log in that user, this user. Perfect. So with here, we are retrieving the user object. Now we just need to log in that user, log in this request with this user, and we are ready to send the user to the root page. Why to the root page? Because we have a route with that name, root. So we need to redirect the user to that route. So for that, we just say return redirect to root. And the only thing that we are missing now is what happens when the form is not valid. If it's a post request and the form is valid, we will create the user. What happens if it's a post request but it's not a valid form? That means the data is not correct. We cannot create a user with that information. In that scenario, let's return render of the request to the same URL, this one here, and the same form actually. So I will copy and paste. So if the form is not valid, we will return the same sign up page with the form, and that form will contain the errors. Go to the browser and start creating a new account. So I will use test@mail.com for testing. When you are creating the password, make sure your password matches all these rules. So I will try with QWERTY1234. Let's see if that works. It worked. It created the account and I'm logged in now. How I know that? Because I got redirected to the root page, and that only happens after the user is created. Register page is working. Now let's work on the login page. So let's create another action here below. Let's call it login view. We cannot call it login because we are importing a function called login. So we need to use a unique name. That's why I'm using login view that will receive the request. And this will be the logic for it. If request method happens to be post, we need to get the data and log in the user. Otherwise, we need to just show the form. So let's create a form. In this case, it's an authentication form that we already imported on the top. And let's return the render of the request, the path for the login HTML, that will be out login HTML, and the form that will be this form. So this is for the get request and they want to see the form. Let's work on the post request. We get to here. Remember, after the user fills the form and press the submit button to login, what we need to do is to create the form as an authentication form, but passing the request post, in this case, the post data. If the form is valid, we will get the user from the form. We will log in the user, this request with this user, and we will redirect the user to the root page again, to the home page. What happens if it is not valid? We will just return this one, actually, the render of the request with this form, and the form will display any errors that may occur. So we have the logic. We need the HTML. We need the template. Wait, before you try it, this guy is full of errors. So let's fix them. First of all, you don't need the post in there. Instead, we need to pass the data as the request.post. And now you can try it. Don't trust this guy, doesn't know how to code. So let's create that HTML inside the out folder. New file, login HTML. And in here, let's start by extending base HTML. Then we will load Crispy forms. And after that, we will load the statics that we may need later on for the CSS. Then in the block called content, we want to render some content. Let's end the block in here. Let me change this one to Django. Perfect. Now let's create the actual form. The method will be post as the backend is expecting. Let's close the form in here. Maybe let's create a heading one. Let's say login, close the heading one. Perfect. Then we need to include CSRF token, Then let's render the form using Crispy tag. Finally, we need a button that says submit or login. Let's close the button. Let's add some classes. We have Bootstrap ready, so let's add some simple classes like VTN, maybe primary. Okay, it is ready. We can improve it adding an horizontal rule in here, and then maybe a label that says don't you have an account? Close the label, and let's put a link to send the user to the sign up page. Close the anchor, and let's say register here, and the URL will be the URL called sign up because we have a URL with that name. And speaking of URLs, we need to create another URL for this new page. The out login path will display the views. We call it login view, and the name for this route will be login. Perfect. So we have another route. Let's get back to the browser. Let's go to /out/login, and there it is. We have the login view. So let's put the email. It's mine. It's test@mail.com. My password is this long and complex password. There it goes. Perfect. I'm in the home page. I was redirected to the root. That means I logged in. Even though it's working, it's hard to tell because there is no indication to whether this is working or not. Let's remove this search box. We don't need it. And instead, let's display a message when the user is logged in. And let's display a different message when the user is not logged in. Maybe when the user is logged in, we can display a link that says log out. And otherwise, we can display a link that says login. And we can redirect the user to the login page. So let's get back to code. Let's go to base HTML. Is where we have the navbar declared. This is the form with the search box that we don't need. So let's get rid of this one. And instead, let's put some Jinja if statement. If the user is authenticated, we will display something like a link, a href that logs out the user, but we don't have such functionality. So let's put the pound in the href for now, and let the text will be logout. That's when the user is authenticated. Else, let's display a link. Work on the href later, and this link will say login, a link to login. We have a URL for login. The name for that route is login. So let's build here that a URL. So we need a URL for the login route, for the login route. Great. We just need to end if, and that's it. Let's get back to the browser and let's see what happens. Refresh. It says log out because I'm logged in. So now we need to put the logic. So when the user clicks on that one, you actually are logged out of the system. So you can see the link that says login. But before we move to there, let's add a couple of CSS classes to these both anchors. So let's put some classes like VTN outline light. That way it will be a white text. Let me copy that classes into your button. It will have the same classes. Save, get back, refresh, and see the difference. So big difference just for a few classes. I think I can use an space in there for the logout. Much better. So let's create the logout functionality. Let's start by asking Django to place a URL in here for the logout route. That route doesn't exist yet, but we are working on it. It will exist in a few seconds. Let's get back to views.py. Let's add another action, logout view that will receive the request. This view is pretty simple. We just need to call the logout method that we imported on the top, and after that the user is logged out. We just need to send the user to the home page now. So let's return a redirect to the root. That's my root URL. So we have the logout functionality ready in there. Now we just need to create the URLs. So let's get back to urls.py. Let's create a new path for out a logout, maybe. The views that will handle this, it's the views logout view. And the name for this one should be logout. Let's get back to the browser and let's try it. Let's refresh. Everything seems to be working. I want to click on the logout. Perfect. I'm still in the home page, but now the button says logged in. If I click on it, I'm in the login form. I can log in and everything is working. But before we finish this video, let's add a tiny bit of CSS and maybe let's display different pages when the user is logged in and when the user is not logged in into your system. So let's get back to code. So let's get back to views.py to the index action. And here we will say if the request user is authenticated, then we will show some page. Otherwise, we will show this, the home page. The home page will be only for non-authenticated users. For authenticated users, we want to display a different page, maybe a dashboard HTML, why not? So if the user is authenticated, show this page, otherwise show the home. So let's go to create this dashboard. Notice that I'm not adding out at the beginning of this one, so my dashboard file should be in the templates. Templates, new file, dashboard HTML. So let's put just a simple heading one for now. We don't put too much time on this one. This video is too long already. So let's say welcome to your dashboard. And below that, let's render a heading 2. And in that heading 2, let's render the username. So everything is ready. Get back to the browser and refresh. I'm logged out. I need to log in again with my test mail, with my super long password. And that's my dashboard page with my email in there, but I'm missing the extend. So that's why it looks different than the other ones. I'm missing to extend base HTML. And I need to specify that this will go inside the block called content and end the block after the HTML. So end block. Get back, refresh. Nice. Logged out because I'm logged in. I know that I'm logged in also because it's displaying my dashboard page. If I click on the logout, I'm not seeing the dashboard page anymore. I'm seeing the general home page and the button says logged in. You click on the login button and you have the ability to log in. You can click in there to register a new account. Perfect. So that's it for today, guys. On the next video, we will work on adding some style to this project. So subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. My name is Sergio and this is Live by the Code.